Hey guys, welcome back to Trash with a capital T. Today we are going to be talking about some more obscure books. Um, they were featured in Paperbacks from Hell because they have great covers. But they definitely are not ones, they're not widely available. I had to hunt these down, and this was a couple years ago. They're even more expensive now. Although I will say my copies were not that expensive. I think I hit searching for them at the right time. But we are going to be talking about two of these books. This author has actually written a bunch of books. I own most of them. I don't know why his books were ones that I just had to grab because they're not really my favorite kind of horror books. But that was one where I was like, I need to get my hands on these. They sound interesting enough where I want to read them. The books are, without further ado, The Desecration of Susan Browning and The Devil and Lisa Black by Russel Martin, or as he's credited here, Russell W. Martin. He writes mostly what would be considered maybe erotic horror. Maybe. I wouldn't consider it, and they're not all that spicy as books. It's more that the characters, so these kinds of books, and this is actually a really common trope. When you read something that is, I'm going to try and fan these out so you can see these wonderful covers. When you see something described as erotic horror, notice there's like either you're dealing with body horror, stuff like that, or you're dealing with kind of like, a mix of what's the best way to put it, because I'm also I'm not worrying about what I'm saying, like my videos get 4 views, who cares? But you're not necessarily talking about erotica. You're not talking always about explicit sex scenes. What you're talking about generally is horror that is attached to sex. So some of those, it's specifically body horror, where someone's body is going through a transformation and there's a sexual aspect to it. Or there could be some kind of body mud or pain and pleasure tied into it too. That's, Hellraiser kind of ties into that. More so in the movies. The books have it too, though. There's some kind of shocking writing in that. This is the other kind. And this is actually really common, I noticed, with paperback horror novels. It's the loss of agency, where for some reason, usually by magic, sometimes by drugs or something else, but usually by magic, a character's agency is removed. They are aware of this and they become tied to someone. And that's what these books fall into. So let's kind of give you a general gist. And we're going to talk about some of these books because we also have to touch on some problematic elements, as we always do with these books. And I'm going to kind of talk to you about how I address them. So the general gist between both books is there is this cult, I want to say a Satanist, in Hollywood that are trying to birth the Antichrist. And Susan Browning and her husband get wrapped up in all of this because Wanda, the leader of this cult, becomes romantically obsessed with Susan's husband, who I believe is an actor. And she essentially bewitches him, pulling him away from Susan. So Susan starts to fight to try and get her husband back. And of course, she gets stuck in all of this craziness, gets stuck in the middle of it, gets bewitched herself, pulls a private eye into this, pulls a priest into this, and she's trying to get her husband back. And everything is working against her. And in the middle of all of this, we have them trying to birth the Antichrist. And why this is important is because that happens, and then we get to this book where Miss Lisa Black becomes a nanny, kind of, for said Antichrist, after the priest from the first book steals the baby after everyone dies, steals the baby, runs off, tries to raise him normal, and then the Satanists find him. And they're like, hey, here are 2 topless nannies that you can look at who aren't really going to take care of the baby. But, they're there. So, want to work with us now? And everything goes to hell for him. They aren't great literature, and the writing is pretty mediocre. It's not bad, though. It avoids one of the things that truly bad writing really it gets to me. It's not overly repetitive, and it doesn't give me a lot of play-by-play. He understands how to move a scene along. Again, though, not great writing, and as I've described the plot, pure cheese. Pure cheese. But these books obviously contain some problematic elements. Already we've talked about how it handles consent, as in these characters can't give it. They have no agency. It's been wiped away by magic. It's gone. Um, and how do you approach that? Well, in this, it's not really overplayed for erotic content. It's really played for the horror aspect of it. At one point, Wanda's right-hand man bewitches Susan and whisks her off to this beach house and basically keeps her under his control so Wanda can get what she wants. And you don't get a ton of like it's a lot of like fade to black sex scenes. There's not a lot of stuff on the page. It's more just implied, which I know these books look like they might be a little spicier than they are, and I was actually shocked by how much they downplay that, especially when you get to some of the really silly stuff in this one. These books do not feel like they were taken seriously by the author, so you should not take them all that seriously if you ever read them. They are not easy to find. The third book he did, it's kind of like a loose series. These two are directly connected, but then you have similar themes pop up in these other books, and they have similar plot or title structures. So you have The Desecration of Susan Browning. You have The Devil and Lisa Black. The third one is The Resurrection of Candy Sterling. Oh my god, I forget the other ones. And I haven't read them yet, so I can't really talk about them. The Resurrection of Candy Sterling is the hardest one to find. That was my like white whale for a while when I was like getting into collecting these and reading them. I had an alert on Abe Books or Thrift Books to tell me if a copy ever came up. It took me 6 months for a copy to even come up. I grabbed it. It was $90. I will never spend that much on a paperback again. And then I didn't read it. I started reading it and I just was like, I am not in the mood for this. Because it's all similar stuff to this. It's a young woman who's going through a rough patch, joins a cult. Now in that one, in this one and that one, because I did kind of flip to the end, the main female character gets the upper hand on everybody. In this one, Lisa is not the main character. She is the title character, but she's not the main character. The main character is Al Crabb, who is a priest in the first book and a minor character who rescues the baby from the cult and runs off. He's really the main character, and he makes super dumb decisions because apparently Russel Martin has no faith in men. And I don't disagree with him in a lot of cases. But he really does play the male characters in these books as kind of idiots. It's a weird turn because these feel like they should feel more like men's fiction, but he doesn't play into it. Susan in this book is actually quite a strong character. She's able to, on her own, basically break the thrall she's put under. That's not to say these are perfect books, and it's not to say that's perfect representation of women. It's not. And then we get into the biggest problematic element, and this is a big spoiler, although I've already spoiled a bunch of this stuff already, so I feel bad, but they're very hard to find. And they're not going to be, as I said on Rage, it's not going to be worth the money you're going to have to spend to get them. So one of the biggest twists, it actually comes up pretty early in this one, and we'll talk about how it's handled because it comes up again in the second book in a different way. Like in a similar way, but it's handled differently. So one of the big twists of this book is Wanda. So Wanda, when she's described, is not this ravishing beauty. She's actually kind of described as odd looking, and there's a hint that she's not really. She doesn't have her body, the way it's described, she doesn't have a very feminine body. Well, surprise, surprise, Wanda is actually trans. And when it's revealed in this book, it's because Susan has hired early on she hires this real sleazeball of a private detective to pull up information on Wanda and the people around her. And he uncovers Wanda's quote-unquote big secret. And the dialogue when that is revealed is so horrific. It is like... Now, when I say so horrific, I wonder if I could flip to it. Probably couldn't. Let's just say it is not... It's not very sensitive to Wanda's identity and her existence. However, we'll get into kind of why I don't think that's the author's view. I think it's how he feels those two characters, specifically the detective who is egging Susan on during this scene, why he feels how they would say it. Because in this book, that detective is talking to Lisa, who was tied to all of this and has kind of escaped as he's trying to track down the baby. The detective is talking to her, and he brings it up, trying to get the same reaction out of Lisa. And Lisa's response was, okay. Not even like a dismissive, but she's like, well, good for her. Like, glad she took control of her life. So that's why I don't think it's actually Russel Martin's view on the subject. I think it's him writing in character, which does bring us to an interesting point. So when you're dealing with these books, this is going to come up a lot, especially books when they try and tie in stuff like that, like queer themes or race. Sorry, gotta adjust. When you're trying to pull that stuff into these books, they don't always deal with them with the most tact, or, as is often the case, they deal with them using language, terminology, and viewpoints that reflect the time they were written. That's not necessarily an excuse, but it is more of a keep your eyes out, because you're going to run into this stuff. If this is something that bothers you, do a little research before you pick up the book. And that's definitely why whenever I've actually mentioned this book to anyone, I have said it's a sleazy, cheesy, goofball book that basically is trying to do Hollywood Wives meets Rosemary's Baby. But it also includes this really problematic element, specifically the treatment of its trans character, who, I might add, is one of my favorite characters in the book. Wanda is the bad guy, or bad woman. She's the evil woman. But she is such a deliciously evil, wicked character. The way she is written is like literally the cackling evil queen. I love her so much. She's really only in Desecration of Susan Browning. She's really only in this one. But she is a fun villain. And you can tell Russel Martin had fun writing her because he lets her, and he does refer to her as her, by the way. He lets her just kind of go over the top when he's writing her. He knows what kind of book he's writing, and he knows what his writing strengths are. He lets her go big. He lets her go over the top. This of the two is actually the most fun for me and probably the easiest to find. I can't pull it up because I'm filming on my phone, but I think I bought this one for like $10, but this was also a couple years ago. It was during the pandemic. If you could find a copy, I mean, with the warnings I've given, I definitely would say check it out. This one, while it definitely has the better... Ooh, nearly dropped my book. Definitely has the better cover, is a lot less formed, and I think part of that is because I don't think he likes Al, the former priest, as a character as much. He has him turn into an idiot pretty quick. So, at the end of this book... Oop, that's the back. At the end of this book, we kind of lose most of the cast. They wander off this mortal coil. I won't tell you how because I don't fully remember. It's been a while. This book, you are losing a lot of those fun characters. You lose Susan. You do keep the sleazy private detective, but he really doesn't get to do too much other than be a bit of a nuisance. And then you lose Wanda. Wanda's presence is kind of felt, and she comes up, but she's not really there. So you don't have that strong female energy where these two women are butting heads. And instead, you basically get Al being well-intentioned in the beginning and then very quickly, and maybe it's because of magic, but we literally just read a book where Susan is able to fight off this magic. With Al, we don't really get that. He just kind of falls into their trap, lets them into his life, buys everything, and then pays for it. And these are not violent, gory books. This one definitely has a lot less steam, but like there's a lot. Neither one of these are like steamy books. These are both pretty mild. But this one it drops the quotient a lot because we have the male lead. But Lisa comes into the story because she's basically hired by the cult once the cult gets Al on board to be the baby's nanny with another woman who she's really not a character. But the whole thing is very like they're walking around and they're taking care of the baby and then they're like in lingerie. And that was his like, here's a sexy element. What is funny is these are published by Playboy Press, just these two out of the series. He published these two with Playboy. The Resurrection of Candy Sterling is Jove, and then they move over to Tor for the last books. And I have heard those last ones are actually much better and kind of lose some of this craziness, although you do keep the cabal of evil wizards or warlocks or whatever. You're not getting anything super serious here. But yeah, these like I said, I enjoyed these. Yes, do I have to also examine like the problematic elements of the books? Yes, and I'll say that you should always be, no matter what you're reading. I have hold on, let me go grab it. Pardon me. I have Ozma of Oz on my reading list, on my TBR. Why? Because I love Return to Oz. And when I read these, and they don't generally include a lot of problematic elements, but when I read these, I also have to keep in mind that sometimes they might say something insensitive about race because of when they were written. Is that an excuse? No, it does mean you have to examine it. It does mean you have to examine your reaction to it and kind of look at, well, why was this okay then? And how have things changed? How have they not changed? It should open a discussion in your mind when you're talking about these subjects. It does not mean you have to hate this book. Now, I don't know if I haven't read Ozma yet. I read Marvelous Land of Oz last year, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. But also, when I was reading this, I was like checking out, about Baum. I wanted to see what were the issues with, if there were issues with him, and there are, specifically when it comes to Native Americans. It's really like first name. Oh, it's not good. It's not good. But you're going to run into it with a lot of these older authors. But it doesn't mean I can't enjoy this. It does mean I have to still approach it critically. It's the same thing. It's weird comparing these two because it's the two farthest things from the spectrum. But it's the same thing when I have to deal with this. Okay, let's examine the content. Let's just not toss it, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. Let's examine it. And you kind of have to look about some of the stuff. Is it because the author's viewpoints are coming through, which when you do run into problematic elements in the Oz books, especially with Baum, it is because his own personal viewpoints are slipping into the book. It's not uncommon. Or is it because the author is writing how he feels the characters should react? Because, like I said, the treatment of trans characters between these two books is night and day. It's actually quite interesting. And it does show you, this doesn't necessarily reflect the author. It reflects the author's view of his characters. And in this one, it's kind of, one, to tip you off that this guy is a sleaze. The PI is a sleaze. But also, the way it reads, it's Susan taking all this anger and hatred and letting it spew forth because of everything that Wanda has done to her. So she suddenly feels like she has an in to wound Wanda, even though Wanda's not in the room. Wanda does not give a flying. And if Wanda had heard it, guess what her response would have been? I still got your man. Maybe magic, but he's mine. Yeah. And then this one, it comes up again, and you literally just get, okay, nothing. We got bigger problems here. Did I mention that someone is like she was a nanny for the Antichrist? She's like, I've dealt with bigger. That's not shocking to me. That's actually quite normal. Yeah. So, I mean, would I recommend these books? It's hard to recommend them when I can't say you can easily find them. If you are up for the hunt, give them a try. I can't recommend past these two, not because I'm worried about the content, but because I haven't read them. So I don't know if they're any good. But I can't necessarily, I can't say, hey, go out and get these books because it might be cost prohibitive. And they are not, I don't think they've ever had modern day reprints. I don't think they ever will. Who knows? Who knows who even owns these books anymore? These are probably going to be lost to time. Sorry, I almost dropped my books. And sadly, that's what we see with a lot of those books. But it is something like, it's interesting. When you love trash, you're going to run into not great elements. You're going to run into offensive. Let's call it what it is. You're going to run into some offensive elements. It happens all the time. And it is something you do have to contend with. Whether it's the language, the content, gender representation, not just when we were talking about trans characters, but also how are women, how are gender roles portrayed and stuff. It can get quite offensive sometimes, especially with older books. That's actually why I have a problem with some older books. Characters can come off as kind of the way female characters are written in some of those is appropriate for how they would be handled at the time. They just drive me nuts. I'm like, I want heroines who are going to take action, who are going to be more involved, and you don't really see that all the time with older books. Yeah, Susan does. Susan knows how to deal with her business. Yeah, but just, if you're new to this world, just be ready. When you're reading older books, you're going to run into stuff that is going to make you have to think. And as much as everyone loves to say these books are great for, and I say it too, are great for shutting off your mind, it doesn't hurt to approach this stuff critically and to really think about what this material is saying. How is the author using this? Is it something the author that is using to express their own personal viewpoints? Or is it something that's just part of the book, part of the world because of what it was part of the world at the time? And this is how these characters would react, even if the author doesn't agree with it. Or if it's just the language these characters would use. Again, it doesn't excuse it because you still have to go, well, why at this time was this acceptable? And you have to kind of look at like where we were in history at the time. And you do kind of have to put everything into context. Doesn't mean it's okay. No. And in some cases, you're also going to run into problematic authors, which I said we're kind of avoiding. But you do have to address that stuff as well. Now, I'm not going to pick on the obvious choice. I'm not going to pick on the Rowling situation. Although it is fitting with what we're talking about now with these books. Because it's funny. This book, The Desecration of Susan Browning, includes anti-trans dialogue between two characters. But I don't get the feeling that the author, in the way that the character of Wanda, the way the character is handled, and the way other characters discuss her outside of that one scene, I don't get the feeling that that is the author's viewpoint. Then you have something like Harry Potter, which doesn't address the issue at all in any of those books. But then you have J.K. Rowling being very vocal about her anti-trans viewpoints. So I guess I did pick on her. But it's the same thing, a big one for me. Okay, I'm going to jump onto something where it's a little more personal for me. It's the same thing when I run into people who recommend I read Ender's Game. And I do understand it is considered one of the best sci-fi books ever written. It's loved by people, specifically best young sci-fi books written for younger readers. Not like kids, but like YA level readers, or maybe a little like preteen. I'm not going to be giving him my money. So if I'm going to read it, I'll buy it used. But like, I do have to contend with that. Whenever I read those kinds of books, I do have to look at it and go, is this something I really want to support? I already know the content of the book. So I know I'm not going to be running into anything in the book that is going to be particularly heinous, although it sounds like there's some stuff in those books anyways that is kind of weird when it comes to sexuality, or handled strangely. But at the same time, like, you do have to have those discussions. Even when we're talking about trash, even when we're talking about paperback books that are meant to be read and discarded, even which don't discard them, sell them. People love these things. Even when we're talking about B movies, it doesn't hurt to always approach stuff critically. Just because you feel like the book isn't worth it, it's worth it. It's worth the discussion. Every book, film, anything that has been put out there, even if that discussion is, this is terrible, and I never want to experience it again, there is a reason to have that discussion because there's always a why. Bring up that why. And that's actually what has kind of made me reevaluate. I keep putting them down because my arms are getting tired. It's why I had fun kind of examining these. It doesn't necessarily mean I excuse the way it's handled. It's clunky. It's offensive. It's not, if it's insensitive. The way it's handled specifically in this one. Not so much in this one. And it also is important to note that Wanda is the villain. Wanda is the one trying to bring the Antichrist into the world. So we do have a trans villain. So we can't ignore that. But Wanda is also the best character in these books. And she gets to become a mother to the Antichrist. So, yes, you do have to examine him. And most people would say these aren't worth the examination. Just toss them. No! Screw that! These are 100% worth the discussion. Why? Because these books were made for the average person. These were made for some guy, some blue collar worker, some normal office worker who just wanted something to read, who maybe wanted something sleazy. These kind of had that feel. Not like you were picking them from an adult bookstore, because they definitely do not go that far. But they had that feel of like it's a little dirty, it's a little naughty. There's the word desecration in the title. Look at this cover. Look at this. It's like it gives you all kinds of like wonderful like sleazy vibes. Love it. So these were books made for like the average Joe or Jane or Jean. I don't know. But they were made for the average reader. So what does that say about what they thought the average reader would find acceptable? Well, in 1981, they probably have not even bat an eye at what was said in this. Why is that? Where has that discussion gone since? Especially within the genre of horror. How are we handling subjects like gender and sex and sexuality and all of that stuff within the genre of horror? Not just high-end horror, 824 horror, but like this type of stuff. The stuff that would be published by Leisure or Zebra back in the day. How is that conversation happening? Because I'll tell you right now, it is happening. There are great trans horror writers out there who are doing splatter and extreme horror that is not getting published by big publishers, but they are building a following. So how is that landscape changed where that is possible? What has the readership done to change to make that possible? And all of that is coming out of reading these two sleazy little books. None of this stuff is useless. It's all a start to a conversation. That's what I love about this stuff. Because it's stuff that also people don't really think about. They don't talk about. Even when you're talking about books like this, there has been way more discussion about these because these are a beloved children's series. We have film versions, all of that. But still, are you digging into, and people have, but are you digging into how the author's personal views reflect certain characters in these books? It's an interesting start. And I mean, obviously, I'm not just saying having a conversation online. I mean, in person. Having these discussions with people. One of the most enjoyable things that I have when I'm talking with people who are like-minded to me is going over like, well, what does that mean? Why is that acceptable? Should we... I'm not for book bans. This has offensive content in it. Okay, don't read it. Don't read it. But it doesn't mean someone else can't read it. Everyone's like, well, their books can be dangerous. Yes, they can be. When we don't talk about what's in them. Talking about them is what can pull the danger back and reveal a lot of interesting information and truths. Now, there are times, obviously, if we're talking about controversial or problematic books, where the author may decide the book is dangerous. Fine. That is up to the author. It is still their book. Well, I already talked about Rage, the banned or lost Stephen King book. It was not banned. It was pulled from publication. Not because of any government intervention, but because King felt the book was not great and was having a negative influence on specific kinds of people. Namely, people who were trying to recreate the plot of the book in real life. That's a problem, he thought, that needed to be dealt with by removing the book from publication. It's not like all the copies were destroyed and the book is unreadable. You can find it. And it's still worthy of discussion. I will say, and I stand by what I said in my trash take, that book is not going to be worth the money. You're going to have to pay to read it. If you can find a copy to read somewhere, or a used copy, fine. If it doesn't cost you a ton of money, that's fine. But it's not going to be worth it. But jumping off of that, do I think these books are worth it? Not for a lot of money. I enjoyed them. Don't get me wrong. I had fun with these. But if you can find them for like $10, I mean, you're probably going to end up paying more for them to be in any kind of readable condition. This book is actually in really rough condition. But it held together while I read it, so cool. Not really, but they're not worth hunting down for that. There's better books out there. But if you're at the used bookstore and these pop up on the shelf, and it sounds like something you can handle, that's not going to cause you problems, it's not going to affect you negatively, give them a shot. There's a lot of great books out there that people would call trash because they think they're offensive. Um, and they might be, as in the case with those. But it doesn't mean they should be ignored. Because if you ignore stuff that you find offensive, you'll never be able to really examine what about it is like. You can't examine it. And I do think it's better to examine, to explore, not explain, but to like really analyze and pull apart and rip into this stuff and get down to the nitty gritty of what allows this to be published, what allows it to be okay. I think the most dangerous books are the books that people refuse to talk about. I don't think these are dangerous books. They're not. Can they be harmful? Yes. For some readers, they definitely can be. And for those readers, steer clear. If it's something you do not, even if it's, steer clear. Just if it's something you don't feel like you can handle, that's fine. And I support your choice not to read it. I will never say push yourself to read stuff that will hurt you. It's never worth it. If you are someone who has survived abuse, I am not going to tell you you have to read Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door. If you feel, I'll tell you what it's about if you ask. I will be honest. I will not sugarcoat it. But I'll leave it up to you if you want to read it or not. But I'm never going to say you have to. Well, it might cause me to harm. It might cause me mental harm. Then don't read it. Don't put yourself through it. Never put yourself through something you aren't comfortable reading or doing. I know some people love to push themselves like that with that stuff, and that's fine, but no book, no movie is worth it. However, you also should not be running around telling other people they shouldn't read it, or that it's too dangerous to read. It should be read. It should be examined by people who can handle it. Because like I said, and I'm going to say again, the most dangerous book is the ones we refuse to talk about. The ones that include content that we deem inappropriate to talk about in polite company. Those books are dangerous. Not because of what they necessarily contain, but with the fact that we're letting them go unchecked. Does that make sense? We're not examining. We're not exploring. We're not taking it and breaking it down. We're just letting it go out there without discussion. And that becomes dangerous. All right. You've gotten my point. And you have heard how I feel about the desecration of Susan Browning and the Devil and Lisa Black. So this video is already running a little long, so I'm going to cut it off here. I'm going to say, go out, check some old school paperbacks. Just be ready. There's going to probably be some stuff you find offensive in them. But don't be afraid to examine them. You know. But if you feel like they're affecting you negatively, move on. Okay. All right. So new videos are posted every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. That might be changing. We'll see how this goes. I might test some videos at other times. I'm still early in the channel. So, all right, guys, enjoy what you're reading. Love what you love. And have an amazing morning, afternoon, or evening. And I will see you all in the next one.